this is how you create a marketing calendar. So the first thing that you do is you start with the money that you want to make. That's how you start your marketing calendar, with the end result. Now, if I could have you guys just write that down on a sheet of paper, just take out a sheet of paper off to the side here and just walk through this with me, okay? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with your desired profit. So let's say, and I'll use a sample here. I'll walk through a sample with you. So let me get a sheet of paper here and we'll walk right through this, okay? All right, so let's say, and we're not going to be crazy and say, off the bat, I want to make $1 million a year profit, because everybody does. 99% of the people aren't willing to do what it takes. So let's just say $250,000 a year, okay? Let's just say that. Now that's profit, $250,000 a year profit. Now when we say $250,000 a year profit, what does that mean in America? It means after overhead, before taxes. So that's what, when people talk about profit, it means after overhead, before taxes. Okay, now we're going to go with so here's what we do. If we want to make $250,000 a year, okay, what's the total amount of money that we have? Now what's step two? The average overhead in a chiropractor's office is between 50 and 70%, okay? So now we're talking about real overhead. I'm not talking about taking your overhead and then taking a lot of your personal expenses that you can put into your overhead legally. So that's not what I'm talking about. Because when you do that, your overhead will go up to 70, 80%, and that's a good thing because you're now writing off 80% of the things in your personal life. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm only talking about your business right now with your ledger. That's it, not things that you're going to claim in your personal life, okay? So let's say 50%. So if overhead's 50%, we want to make $250,000, so we have to collect $500,000. That's where we're at. Next thing you do is divide that number by the dollar per visit to give you the number of visits that you need. So I'm going to take, now if you could do the same thing with your number, whatever your number is, if you want to make $500,000, whatever it is, but try to be realistic because we're trying to actually do a real marketing calendar. Okay. So having said that, so 500, let's say, so we have to collect $500,000 at 50% overhead to make $250,000. So we want to divide that by the dollar per visit. That's going to give us the number of visits that year we're going to need. Now, the dollar per visit, I'm just going to use, I'm going to use 50. I think that's just a fair number. $50 per visit. There's definitely chiropractors that have, 60, 70, 80. If you're below 50, you're probably not doing several things right, to be honest with you. It's pretty easy to get a $50 per visit. So let's go ahead and use that number. So we got to be familiar with national averages too. And by the way, use your dollar per visit. If you know your dollar per visit collection, and by the way, it's collection, not production. If you know your dollar per visit, use that number because now it's a real number, okay? So I'm going to have $500,000 that I need to make. I'm going to divide that by $50 per visit. That's going to give me how many visits that I need that year at $50, at a $50. So that's 10,000 visits. So 10,000 visits. Now I need to divide that number by my expected patient retention. Now you should know your patient retention, okay? So we want to take our patient retention now and divide in other words, this is the average amount of visits that somebody's going to stay at $50. So you should also know that. So your number should be real. I'm going to use national averages, okay? So the national average of patient retention is 18. So 10,000 divided by 18 is going to give me, so we divide the expected patient retention, divide that by, and hold 1 second here. Let me make sure I've got this. So we take our dollar per visit. So we're starting at 500,000. Divide that by our dollar per visit. That's 50. That gives us. Let me make sure I got my math straight here as we move through this. So 500,000 divided by 50 is 10,000. 50 are 500,000 collections divided by a $50 per visit. That's going to be 10,000. 10,000 patient visits. 10,000 patient visits divided by 18 is going to be 555. So that's the number of, wait a minute, something's not coming up right here. What I'm doing is reverse engineering to get to the number of new patients you need based on your dollar per visit and your patient retention and overhead. That's what we're doing. So we're just reversing it out. But for some reason, maybe you guys can see what I'm doing wrong, but I'm getting 555, and that's not right. So if we took 10,000, so we had 500,000, that's what we want to collect, divide that by a $50 per visit, that gives 500,000 divided by, that's 10,000 visits. Divide your patient retention, which is 18 into 10,000, that's 555.
Divide that by 12 for months.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, I don't know why I was not seeing it, but that is a correct number. So we're going to divide it by 52 weeks instead of monthly. So if you're right, if you wanted to do it monthly, but weekly, we want to scale it down to weekly. It gets more manageable, and you can see it. So that's 10.6, and I'm just going to round it off to 10. So that's 10 new patients. So you need 10 new patients a week at 52 weeks at a $50 per visit at a patient retention of 18. And by the way, you can see how important patient retention is right now, because watch this. Watch how less, so we got 10,000. Watch how less number of new patients that I need if my patient retention was, say, 25. That's only 400. 400 divided by 52 is 7. That's the difference patient retention makes. So patient retention is unbelievably important. That's why that's the very first thing we pay ungodly amount of attention to, knowing how to keep your patients, because everything goes bad if you don't know how to keep patients. Okay, now the national average is 18, okay, and I'm not going to get into the specifics of what it should be, shouldn't be, case average, all that stuff, okay. Remember, there's 3 types of patient retention, too. There's symptom care, which would be obviously a lot less than 18. Functional capacity care would be more than 18, if it's based on the science of the 3 phases of healing. So 18 will not even cover the 3 phases of healing. And then there's lifestyle. So, when we talk about 18 being patient retention, that's a small number relative to what it could be, okay? Okay, so we're going to stick with 10, so that's 10 new patients a week, okay?